again, we have very good colleagues talking to us here today, Ahlberg and Roy Andersson, who are the experts in many ways in engineering education at Lund University, and have twice before been really helpful for us when we were starting our process here with the Teaching Academy of the public universities, giving very good workshops for those who were applying. And in our previous talk, we talked about teaching portfolios and what is the essence of the teaching portfolio, which is the thing that the applicants hand in as an application for becoming a member of the academy. But the cases in your workshop, you suggest that the application is built up on cases. I can't remember, you said 3 or 4 cases. And what is a case in this sense?
All right. So yes, we really do find the concrete cases of teaching practice to be the core of the teaching portfolio, because that's where you can judge whether or not an academic teacher has developed his or her own teaching. So what do we really mean by a teaching practice case? Well, first of all, you need to have some sort of observation. Maybe a problem where the students have struggled, your own students have struggled with the learning of whatever. And on top of that, you need to come up with some sort of a remedy, something you tried in your teaching design and in your teaching act, in order for your students to overcome these problems. So change of teaching or so. And on top of that, it's really good. It's a really good idea if you can come up with some ideas of what were the effects of these things that you tried out, really. So things that you can pick up in exams, in course evaluations, with your own observations in the classroom, or maybe in field work or wherever. And finally, you also ideally would need some reference to evidence. How can we believe in this story that we are receiving about this very concrete case of improving teaching over time here. So an evidence can be something that you pick out of the CV of your portfolio, or out of the evidence chapter of your portfolio, etc.
Yeah, the appendices and so on. Or
yes.
Yes.
And one important thing with the core part of a teaching portfolio is your cases, because that's where you show your teaching practice. But and as a start of a teaching portfolio, you need some kind of general statement what you think is important, your pedagogical core principles that you, because then if you state them in the beginning of the portfolio, this is what I think good teaching is, and reflect a little bit on that. And then when it comes to the cases, there you're showing that you actually are living as your prayer. And that's, we have seen problems sometimes, that there are teachers that know what good teaching is. And I mean, they have looked at the research. If you teach in this way, the students will learn more. But that's invisible in their own teaching practice. So they know how to do it, but they don't show that they do it. And that's the part where the cases comes in, that you actually show that you're living as you're supposed. I mean, what you say is important.
Yeah. So you state your principles, saying, I believe that good teaching is this and this, or that you should emphasize this and this. And you can discuss that, and then you actually have to demonstrate how you apply these principles in actual teaching practice, your actual teaching practice. And then try to, like you said, Anders, both say, so I want to select the case because this is where my student had a problem, or this is where I felt not at ease with what I was doing, or whatever, and this is what I tried. Based on my principles, I tried these and these methods to change teaching methods or assessment or whatever you think is the best possible way to enhance what you are doing, and then what happened and how can you evidence that something changed. So that would be a case.
Exactly.
And could you have a case like with your supervision as well as?
Absolutely, yeah. Or maybe a case of your role as a study director, because you did certain planning things in your teaching team. So don't forget that part either.
So it doesn't have to be kind of connected with your actual, classroom teaching. It can be the way that you are in your leadership role or.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say that, if you have a leadership role and show that you do this in an informed way, and so that's a good case.
Yeah.
But sometimes people think, oh, I need to have had an official leading role as a study director or so. But when we talk about pedagogical leadership, that's a lot about your leadership in the classroom. In relation with the students, with your teaching assistants in your course, and so you can demonstrate a good educational leadership without having a formal role. I think we should be very, very clear about that, because sometimes people mismatch this, that you need to have an official role.
Yeah.
So let's take off with the helicopter view and just look at the teaching portfolio as a container of, let's say, 3 or 4 or maybe even 5 cases. So you have to choose your cases so that they are not only showing the same from case to case, but rather, maybe 1 case on supervision, maybe 2 cases on your teaching, maybe 1 case on your leadership activities and so forth. And when you look at all the cases from a distance, it's a really good idea if you show that you have some grit as a university teacher. That is to say, yes, I was frustrated because it didn't go too well here for my students in this course over here, so I did something about it, and it actually resulted in some improvement. And then when you go from case to case to case, you can actually see that, oh, here's a teacher who is iteratively improving his or her own teaching, and is never giving up, is never content, and probably driven by some frustration regarding the outcome of the student learning. I guess that's one of the strongest driving forces here.
Yeah, or curiosity or interest.
Yes.
There are many. So you would say you try to give a broad view of your activities in different roles in your cases, not focus on the multiple ways of doing this, but always based on the same principles that you stated in the beginning.
Yeah.
So
And I've seen half-finished portfolios where there are no cases, and the thing that happens when you read those texts is that you never get down to such a detail that you can believe in the text.
Yeah.
So if you have no cases, there's quite often quite a clear doubt. How can I believe in these ideas of teaching and learning in the best of worlds?
Mm-hmm. So the cases is kind of grounding more philosophical and educational ideas into daily activities, which is a messy world often, and it's difficult because things don't always go. Could I report a case? Let's say if I had a case that I really was frustrated about this, and I read a lot and I tried a lot, but it didn't work anyway. Can I only have successful cases? Should I only have successful cases? If I was really reflecting and saying, this is what I wanted to do, but this happened and then, my colleagues were not happy with this and I had to, or should I only talk about successful cases? Maybe that's.
So in the typical, let's say, Scandinavian or Nordic cultures, I think it's very welcome to have cases that didn't work out, because in those cases, you are really showing your ability to reflect and to take a new approach to a problem and not give up and so forth. we have seen some teaching portfolios from North America sometimes, where it's custom to sort of hide your weaknesses and show your strengths. But in the typical Scandinavian or Nordic teaching portfolio in academia, I would say that failed cases is actually an asset, a value, something that's important to reflect upon. So I'd say that is the norm.
The important part in this is that you show that you approach this is in a
scholarly way
and informed way, and what lesson was learned even from a failure. So you just, I failed, I will never do this again. But I mean, why did you fail? If you can have a discussion about that, so I mean, it still goes back to the informed discussion, or informed reflection.
And in that case, the challenges and the hindrances become actually the case. So why ddid this not work out, and what could I possibly have done differently, and what do I need to rethink if I do this again? So it is.
I've seen a few portfolios, like especially teachers that are very experienced. They said, in the early 2000, I tried this because of this, but it didn't work. But now, after reading more about teaching and learning and taking these courses, I realize the mistake I did then. So now I approach it in a different way, and now I can see that the throughput from the students are higher, and the grades are higher, whatever. So I mean, normally there is a time frame. Things you did wrong before you knew enough, and then now you can. That's a good case.
Well, you've seen so many cases and read so many cases. What do applicants find most difficult? What is the most difficult part of creating your cases? What is the biggest challenge?
Applicants, what they worry about, do you mean?
Yeah, what do they find difficult? What do you find lacking when you read cases, or what is the main pitfalls, maybe?
They are quite prone to worry about not having evidence for everything, and that is very, very normal, very, very human to not have evidence for everything. So you only need sufficient amount of evidence to somehow support your story. I mean, to make it probable. So that's one of the things. And another thing that's we can quite often see in premature portfolio text is that there's a weak link between observed problem and chosen solution for a case. So we get stories where someone tells you, I did this in my teaching, period.
Yes, and nothing else. You don't know how it went, or
or
if it was.
Yes, so that link, so that chain of events is sort of broken up into pieces. I think that's very common.
It's probably then lack of reflection on these links. That
absolutely.
Normally we try to use the didactic triangle, where you have the teacher in one end, the students, and then the subject. And some of the portfolios are very focused on the node, the teacher node. You just describe what you are doing. You don't see the subject, you don't see the students. So if you can focus on the relation between the student and the student and the teacher, the teacher and the subject, and even the best, the relationship between the students and the subject, because that's the key thing, that how the students are working, what are you providing to have them. And if you can, look at the whole picture, see this as a whole, then it's an even better portfolio normally. But if you just focus on the node to be very descriptive, that's normally not good enough. You need to include, you need to see the students in a portfolio. You need to see the subject in a portfolio.
And that relates to the criteria that we use to evaluate it, both student-centeredness and the ability to connect with the subject and connect students to the subject. So
another mismatch that we sometimes see is between the teaching core principles that you sort of declare in your teaching portfolio and the cases. So yes, you get a good reference to a good paper or book on some pedagogical issue. And then you get some good cases, but there's really not a good match between the two.
Yes.
So that is a thing that some portfolio writers have to struggle with between version 2 and version 3 of their text. Yeah.
So when I would be writing my cases, I would say, okay, do they show the breadth of my expertise?
Yes.
Are they actually demonstrations of the principles that I stated in the beginning? Yes. Are they focused on the student and the student's activities with the subject? So am I in like a secondary role rather than on the forefront? So I'm looking at what happens in learning actually more than what I'm doing as a teacher. And then can I evidence somehow, not thoroughly for every single act, but do I have sufficient evidence for my cases? That'll be
absolutely. And also the cases should actually reflect your own teacher role as an expert in the discipline. Yeah. So I mean, if you are a teacher in like in my background, I'm a sedimentologist, then I will know the learning hurdles that sedimentology students are experiencing. So there is actually an element in your teaching portfolio of knowing your discipline from a pedagogical point of view.
So what are the core concepts? What are the troublesome knowledge or whatever you have there that is difficult for students to work on?
So writing a teaching portfolio is thus not a generic thing. It's actually something that's rooted in your own relation to your own discipline.
And probably also related to your context where you find yourself in the school or the department you are within as well. Sure. That was great. Thank you.
There's one more thing with the cases. Yes, now when we're talking about the cases in our discussion here, we are talking about the track record of the teacher, so to speak. But a teaching portfolio should also have a short idea of what the teacher is going to do in the future, a future chapter. And actually, what is a future chapter in a teaching portfolio? It's actually a case that is not yet finished. Yes. So you have observed something, you have thought about the remedy, but you're not quite there yet. So I think that's a good way of thinking of the future part of your teaching reflection.
The cases you are going to establish or work on. Yeah.
Next
you agree, Roy?
Yeah, and I've seen the portfolios where you have a separate section about what you plan to do in the future. But I've seen other portfolios where you actually, for the different cases you have, you talk about what's the next step, and that you do that for all cases. Yeah. And then in the end you say, and in addition to the cases I had, I'm planning to do this with just one sentence. So I mean, there is not one way of
doing
including,
the portfolio.
But you should show that, I mean, you have done great stuff and you're still thinking of doing great stuff.
Want to do more.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. Thank you.